My name is Kelsey Whalen, and today I will be discussing R.A. Scotty's book, Set and Sea, The Great Hurricane of 1938. I'd like to open with a quote from forecaster Charles Pierce, who, looking back, described the Great New England Hurricane as one of the most unusual and, from the viewpoint of the meteorologist, one of the most interesting storms in history. Because of the peculiar temperature and wind distribution in the upper atmosphere, instead of following its normal course, it moved straight northward over what, at that time, was the most densely populated area in the world. In 1938, a hurricane was expected to hit South Florida. Instead, it thrived in the warm waters of the Gulf Stream and headed northeast toward New England. Charles Pierce was the only forecaster who recognized the hurricane's significant danger. To most, the storm was a surprise. On September 21, 1938, the hurricane made landfall first in Long Island, then a second time in southern Connecticut. It was a Category 3 storm, traveling at 47 miles per hour. Because of the relatively small size of New England, the states surrounding New York and Connecticut, such as Massachusetts and Rhode Island, were severely affected. This slide depicts estimated statistics of the Great Hurricane of 1938, according to the National Weather Service. The height of waves and storm surge are especially notable, and were especially destructive. While different sources, including History.com, the National Weather Service, and R.A. Scotty, generally agree on wave size, number of deaths, storm speed, and wind gusts, there is considerable variation on the amount of damage. The image here shows a very different cost estimate, for example. As you can see, the damage from the Great Hurricane was devastating. These photos show wreckage at the Coal River and in West Hampton. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed, coastlines were completely cleared, and hundreds of lives were lost. Most historical and government sources focus on Long Island, New York, and southern Connecticut. Particularly noted is a terrible fire, the largest to hit the town since 1781, that blazed in New London, Connecticut, fanned by hurricane winds. To give a bit of context, in 1938, the National Weather Service was known as the U.S. Weather Bureau. It was decentralized across the country, with the Hurricane Central located in Jacksonville, Florida. The hurricane of 1938 is documented as the worst in New England history and the fourth deadliest storm in U.S. history. Part of this was due to the rarity of hurricanes in the Northeast and the subsequent minimized planning. To further the resulting damage and economic effects, this hurricane occurred between the Great Depression and World War II. R.A. Scotty narrates a personalized approach to the Great Hurricane of 1938. He focuses on the town of Jamestown, Rhode Island, and the Narragansett Bay. His story follows several families living in Jamestown and their lives directly before, during, and after the hurricane. He paints a wonderful picture of daily life in Rhode Island and the normal events that took place on September 21st. School, birthday parties, cooking. Readers have a narrative of how families experienced the unexpected hurricane and desperately tried to save themselves and their communities. In Scotty's perspective, the Great Hurricane of 1938 destroyed all sense of normalcy and changed the town forever. This quote, toward the end of the book, illustrates the devastating effect that the hurricane had on individual New Englanders. The vagaries of nature shook the status quo and weakened its underpinnings. On that rough September afternoon, wealth, social position, and property provided no buffer from the fury of wind and water. The hurricane has been called a savage leveler. Scotty's portrayal of the hurricane is mostly accurate when compared to historical and government reports, though he sees the event through a different lens. Scotty focuses on individual experience and turmoil. Historical documents focus on the numbers relating to the storm. Today, a Category 3 hurricane may not be so deadly. In 1938, however, this storm was disastrous because of reduced planning and preparation and underdeveloped technology and weather tracking. There is controversy over the predictability and lack of warnings given by the U.S. Weather Bureau at the time, as New Englanders were completely caught off guard by the hurricane. This has large implications for emergency management today. In 1938, President Roosevelt dispatched 100,000 relief workers to respond to the disaster, which should certainly be noted today. The New London fire is a great example of a pitfall in emergency management and response. Fallen trees and power lines prevented the fire department from responding to the disaster for 6 hours. Any able-bodied man in the area was recruited by the local police to help extinguish the fire. It is important for emergency management to plan for events where the official first responders are unable to respond and to anticipate hazards that result from the disaster itself. Another important consideration is hazards that may be rare. Hurricanes are fairly uncommon in New England, but a lack of preparation makes them extremely devastating. Since 1938, weather detection and tracking equipment has improved tremendously. The state of Rhode Island has developed evacuation plans for coastal communities, which were entirely lacking previously. Planning and adequate preparation are key. Sudden Sea was both a fascinating and exhilarating read. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to ask questions.